Hey guys, Jared with Trident Fly Fishing, and today we're going to be tying a Ragdolly inspired articulated streamer. It's a great streamer tied by Andreas Anderson, and today we're going to tie it in a baby brown color, tan and yellow. It's a great fly, moves really well in the water, and is light and easy to cast. Alright, so for the rear hook here, we're going to use a Gamakatsu B10S in a 1, size 1. You just want to make sure that it's seated in the vise pretty well, because you're going to put a good amount of tension on this hook. So I'm using 210 denier in a brown. Just put a little bit of thread on the hook, and then we are going to tie in 2 saddle hackles for the tail, and we're going to tie them splayed. So just measure them so they are roughly about shank and a half in length. Tie them down, and we'll clean them up after. That's pretty good. The nice thing about streamers is you don't have to be incredibly clean when you tie. Alright. Next I'm going to tie in some fluorescent yellow marabou, and for this I like to break off the tip, and then a good little chunk. I'm using a whole quill here, and I want that to extend just shy of the halfway mark on those. It doesn't really matter, but that's about right. Tie that in. Alright, and it's easier just to trim this off if you kind of twist it together. Next I'm going to grab some craft fur, and I'm going to grab probably a chunk that's a little less than half the diameter of a pencil. Just clean out all the underfur here. Measure that so it extends almost to the tips of the hackle, and trim it. And we're going to reverse tie it in so the butt's facing back. We'll pull it over after. Alright, then I'm going to grab white craft fur and do the same thing on the bottom. Again, strip out all the fuzzies in the bottom, and then trim it to length. Since I already have my measurement, it's easier if I just invert the hook here and tie it in on the bottom to make sure it's evenly distributed. Crank it down. Next I'm going to tie in some flash, and I just have a flash blend of Flashabou. So I'm going to grab probably 4 or 5 strands, and I'm going to double them over, tie them in the middle, right on top of the hook shank. Trim out those. You can tie that as long or as short as you like. Sometimes I like to tie it extending past the tail as a flash tail, and sometimes just even with the tail. Depends what you want. Next we're going to fold the craft fur back, do 2 at a time. Make sure it's evenly distributed. Tie it down. Forwards. Alright, so for the body, I'm going to use Palmer chenille. You don't need a whole lot of it. Just tie it in. Bring it back. Oops. And just advance your thread. Leave it with a little room behind the hook eye. So just again, palmer this forwards with some open spiral wraps. Just make sure that the flash is all laying backwards when you do. Stroke it back. Alright, tie that off. Trim it close. So the nice thing about this fly is it just repeats as far as the tying procedure. So I'm going to take a piece of marabou, just like in the rear, tie that so it extends, just covering that flash there. Twist that up, trim it, cover those, and then again grab some tan craft fur, about the same size, a little less than half a pencil diameter. Clean out the fuzzies, take a measurement. I just want that to extend just past the marabou. Trim it off and reverse tie it in. Alright, so invert the hook again. Grab your white craft fur, about the same size again. Your measurement should be the same as well, but you can always hold it up and check. So reverse tie that in. Make sure it's evenly distributed. Bring it forwards. Turn your hook again and tie in some flash. So about 4 strands here, doubled over. Tie them in right on top. Evenly distributed. And trim them to length. Just bring your thread up right into your tie-in point before you reverse tie these or push them back. It'll just make it a lot easier and cleaner. Pull that back. Tie them down. Oop. Will slip sometimes. Craft fur is pretty slippery. Alright. Just whip finish. So just add a little bit of zap gap just to reinforce this tie-in point. Just alright. Next we're going to articulate this, so we're going to grab a second hook, which is going to be a Partridge Universal Predator and a 4/0. Let's just put that in the vise. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do to articulate this is just lay down a thread base. Alright. And grab our wire, which is just a 6-strand coated metal wire. And bring that up right on top of the hook shank. And then I'm only going to bring the wire up to this point because I'm going to tie in a deer hair head here. And it's easier to tie the head if you don't put the wire underneath. So fold it back for durability. Not that it's going to pull out, just in case. So just trim this little tag end off, and you should use dikes, but I'm just going to use some junkie scissors, the back of them. Cover that butt end up. Bring it back. Next you're going to grab the section that we just tied here and your articulation beads, and I'm going to use 2 beads, and they're 6mm. Thread those on. Let's see. And then thread your fly on. So this is important as far as your measurement and how much movement you're going to get and if the fly fouls. So I like to keep a little bit of a loop, but not too much. And then I want to wrap down the bend here a little bit. so that the hook shanks are still in line, but it's not going to foul. I'm actually going to tighten that up a little bit. Right about there. So just wrap this wire forwards right to the same tie-in point as the other one, and we're going to fold it back as well. Just trying to keep it on top of the hook shank. So fold that back. Bring it back. And trim it off. So this part of the fly is the exact same as the other part. So again, the first thing we're going to do is grab a piece of marabou, break off the very tips, get rid of extra fuzz, measure it so that it kind of covers this gap and extends about 3/4 up the other marabou wing, and then tie it right in on top. Twist that up, trim it, cover those butts, grab your craft fur, so tan on top, white on the bottom, about the same or a little bit more as far as diameter or amount. Just because whenever you tie an articulated fly, especially if they're the same front and back, you want the front to be a little denser, and it just helps with movement, creating more turbulence up front. Alright, get that right in on top of the hook shank. Strip off the fuzzies. Take a measurement. Trim it to length. And reverse tie it in. Next, I'm going to grab some flash. Same flash we've been using. About 4 or 5 strands. Alright. Let's bring your thread up and then reverse these back. Watch the hook point. Especially with these partridge hooks, they're wicked sharp. Alright. Just get that back, stroke it back, get it where you want it, nice and evenly distributed. And then come back with your thread. It's pretty slippery. And tie it off. There we go. Alright. Just hit it with a little bit of Zap-A-Gap. So it doesn't slip off. Next, we're going to grab that Palmer chenille again. And you're probably going to want about a 6-inch piece for this. Alright, tie that in on your side of the hook shank. Advance your thread to right where we folded the wire back. So wrap this forwards, making sure to stroke the flash back. Just leave enough room for the head here. So tie that off. Trim it. Wrap back a little bit, just make sure you have it. Alright. So now we're going to grab some bucktail, and what that's going to do is support our wing here and add a little more volume up front, and you just want bucktail that matches your marabou color. So I'm going to use yellow again. I'm grabbing a pretty good sized chunk, almost the diameter of a pencil, stripping out all the butts, the short butts, measuring that so it extends past all that flash and almost to the start of the other hook, if you can see that. Alright. Alright. So now I'm going to grab another chunk of marabou, break off the tip. And what breaking off the tip does, it just makes sure they don't get a very square piece of marabou, and that the tips that you do have are stronger as well. So I want this to extend right to that 3/4 mark on the bucktail. It's right about there. Right. And twist that up. Grab your craft fur, tan on top and white on the bottom. Good sized chunk. Measure that. So it extends right to that bucktail. Trim it and reverse tie it. So we're going to invert the hook. Grab our white. Strip out all the fuzzies. Measure that so it's the same length roughly as the tan. Even up the butts. And tie that in. Alright, so grab another hank of flash. About 3 or 4 strands here. Fold them in half. Cut that little loop and then fold them over your thread. And pull them into position right on top of the hook shank. Alright. Just gonna push this back. Make sure everything's clean, evenly distributed. Gonna look on the other side. Alright. Tie that down. Just bring your thread up. I'm going to whip finish here and switch to GSP for spinning the deer hair. And a little zap-a-gap just for durability, and so that your thread wraps don't slip. Just start your GSP thread. GSP is really slippery, so you do want to make sure you get it in there and get a nice base. It's also really hard to cut. Here it goes. Just grabbing a good sized chunk here, about the diameter of a pencil. Comb out all the underfur. And you shouldn't need to stack the tips, but you can if you want. This one's pretty aligned. So I'm going to measure my collar. This first tie-in point is going to be my collar. I want it to extend about 3/4 mark on that marabou there. Tie it in. So we're not spinning, we're stacking. So when I tie this in, I'm going to go one loose wrap over, second, and then pull straight down to flare. Yep. Kind of distribute it a little bit so it's even. So I'm going to rotate the hook again. Grab about the same diameter piece in white. Measure my tips so they're the same. Tie that down in the same spot. So again, loose wrap, second wrap, and then pull straight down. Alright, so just push all these butts back. Kind of wiggle them around so you don't trap anything. Get them evenly distributed. And then with tension on your thread, here, just pull it through. Get a couple wraps in front. Alright. Alright. So hold that at a 45-degree angle here. On your side of the hook shank. Come over with a loose wrap. Kind of rock the thread just to make sure you don't trap anything or too much. And then pull down. It should more or less rotate to the top of the hook shank. Then invert your hook again. Grab again the same size chunk in white, about the diameter of a pencil. Be able to come right through. Just wiggle your thread so you don't trap too much. Loose, second one. Then straight down and flare it. Alright. Flip that back over. Pack the hair back a little bit. Put tension back on that. Bring your thread forwards. A couple of wraps in front. And then whip finish. Which is tough to do with all this material. And I am going to trap some, but that's fine. GSP should more or less cut anything you trap. Pull it down real tight. And trim it off. Alright, so to trim the head, I'm just going to use a double-sided razor blade. And the first cut I'm going to make is just to get most of the bulk away. And it's from the top here at about a 45-degree angle. Just push it. And what I'm trying not to do is cut that collar that I created, but cut right up to it. Alright. The next cut is going to be on the bottom here. Push that through. All the way back to that collar. Next I'm going to trim the sides, so about the same angle. And if you use a hook eye as a reference point, it's a good kind of indicator of where you should be. Just push it right through. Alright, next side. Alright, those are kind of the major cuts. Next I'm just going to put this thing in my hand, take it out of the vise, just to get the fine detailed cuts. So, steeper angle on the head. You'll know you're getting right when you see it becomes really dense and almost looks like a single piece rather than a bunch of little pieces of deer hair. So just make sure this is pretty flat. Alright, the sides. And then I like to just kind of round off these sharp corners and clean anything else up. look, make sure everything's even, which it seems to be pretty even. Just clean up right around the hook eye. Alright, put that back in the vise and take a look. So anything that you come with scissors and kind of get. Alright. Next we're going to add some eyes. So for the eyes I have 8mm fish skull living eyes in a wind color. I'm going to apply super glue right to the back of the eye. And then stick it on here without gluing my fingers down. And then put one on the other side. That's pretty much it. You can take a little bit of super glue and just kind of reinforce our tie-off point here. Make sure nothing's going anywhere. That GSP is really tough. You shouldn't have an issue with it. You could also take a lighter and heat up your bobbin or bodkin and kind of come through the eye here if you have any stragglers in the eye, which we don't. So that's it. That's the Ragdolly Articulated Streamer in kind of a baby brown attractor color. It fishes well in this color for me on sandy and rocky bottoms. I like to fish it with a downstream drift and throw mends to twitch it. If you strip it hard, it will kind of pause up front and the back will come forwards and you'll get a nice little profile show. And it fishes incredibly well in the fall for aggressive spawning fish. Alright, you can find all the materials right here on tridentflyfishing.com. Thanks for watching.